All right, and we're back, and it's COMP308, Emerging Web Technologies, or Emerging Technologies, and we're um, week 5, lesson 5, part 4. Because yesterday we did 1, 2, and 3. And what I was kind of talking about is yesterday was assignment number 2 and a little bit of Ajax. But I'm also going to just give you a preview. I'm going to be looking at the mean stack, is what it's called, right, going forward. Because one of the things I want to try and do is incorporate MongoDB, Express.js, AngularJS, and Node.js to create this full stack kind of framework. So if you go to this site, it's actually mean.io. This is what we're going to be doing. And basically it's a full stack to use all of these elements. So MongoDB, Express, AngularJS, and Node, right? So this is the next piece that we're going to be studying. We're going to probably start it, if not next week, the week after, so when we come back, right? And we're going to be getting into what this all means and how do we use MongoDB to create or modify or to hold information for us, right? Using NoSQL, no SQL, right? Express, which is this flexible web application framework where we can actually take our content again. You're going to spin your content every single time. You're going to take your portfolio site, take the content out of it. You've already got your content for it, and we're going to spin it with Express, and we're going to use Express next time, as opposed to just like we're doing right now, where you're going to use we're going to be using jQuery mobile for this assignment number 2. Assignment number 3, you'll be using the mean stack to create your web, right? So take the same content, spin it into using AngularJS and Node, right? So this will give you to the next level. If you understand the mean stack, okay, this MongoDB Express, AngularJS, which is a framework for creating websites, and Node.js, which is a back-end platform as a web server, you can do all this stuff without the use of PHP. This is the idea here. So we're going to use the mean stack. So if you want to read ahead, take a look at this mean stack. There's also a book that I'm going to recommend as we move forward. If you want to, I'm not going to make you buy it, of course. It's just a recommendation that if you want to look at it. I think it's another $30 book that talks about the mean stack, and we're going to follow that book for the next set of exercises, which I'm going to let you know which one it is. Okay, so I'm not going to just like talk out of anywhere from nowhere. I'm going to kind of follow a pattern for us to create this our stuff for the next piece. After this, after mean, we're going to get into some web services. I'm probably going to hit this Google Web Services or Amazon. I'm not sure if I'm going to do Google or Amazon yet. I'm going to have to talk with the other professor and see what he's doing, just so that we're on the same page. Okay, but for now, for the next piece, take a look at mean and what it means. And if you notice, it's using an I/O page. It's using an I/O page, and usually I/O page means that there's probably some GitHub backend. Okay, but this is really cool. And if you follow there's a lot of really cool tutorials with mean and MongoDB and so on, that kind of links all of these technologies together to create the stuff that we need. And we can still stay flexible. Instead of Express, you can sub out Express to be as responsive as you need it to be. And you could actually sub in something like a foundation framework in here, as well as, because it's just JavaScript and HTML, right, with Express. And you can also use Bootstrap if you're using Bootstrap. So all the same functionality we had before, we can do, but we're going to do this. We're going to use this mean stack. So that's what's coming up. I'll talk more about that as we go forward. Okay. But for today, we're going to go back to talking about Ajax a little bit. And yesterday, where we left off, and I want to just go back in there, we were kind of on slide 8 from yesterday. So we looked at this, and I'm going to pull this up. This is what we were talking about yesterday, right? Where we actually read a file, and I had some examples of stuff we pulled up. We kind of created our own Ajax demo, and if you want to follow me yesterday, from yesterday it was COMP308. And it was Ajax demo. If you look on my GitHub site, that's where it is, right? Talks about that stuff. Okay, and there is your team XML file, as well as the index.html file and the app.js file that we were using to read stuff. And when we ran it yesterday, if you remember, the final run of this thing that ran kind of did this, right? Tom, you know, and so on. So this is good because it kind of populates our data, but we need to target these things. If we're going to take this information in, right? This information comes right into team members, right? How can I pull this stuff in to the team members if I was going to go to take this to the next level, right? And then target it with CSS. Anyone have an idea of what we could do? So I'm reading it. I'm reading the file, this XML file, right? But I need to use some CSS here to modify what I'm pulling in. What do I do? Well, let's take a look at the JavaScript, right? My JavaScript right now reads every element, right? And I'm creating this HTML. I've created this HTML variable, right, in JavaScript to hold the entire, all these different nodes, right? And if you notice, they're just, all I'm doing is surrounding them by these line breaks. That's what they are, line break, that's what I'm putting in here. Well, if I can do this, right, and I'm creating my HTML document, right, couldn't I prepend or use a prefix, like to make this as an example, instead of just a line break, couldn't I make my name heading 2, headline 2? I could, right? And the way I could do that is in here, while I'm adding some more code, right? I know that my headline 2, right, I have to start it off with H2, right? And that's the first piece I've got to add in there, right? And I'm going to concatenate it, so that's going to be into my string, right? And then in here, before my line break, I want to put in, I'm going to write in my /H2 closing brace, right? So if I do this, just this change right here for the name, so my name is going to be an H2 tag, right? Let's see how I do that. And what I'm doing is I'm actually writing to the DOM, right? I'm writing content back out to the page. So let's take a look at that and kind of refresh, see what that does, if it works. All right, Tom and Ilya. So I've got some basic formatting, right, that comes right in there. So now it's not like it's, you know, it's basic. It's not like as basic as before, but it really isn't exactly what I want, is it? Right? What I want to do actually when I come in here is create my structure, right? So that way, well, you know what? Maybe for me to highlight this, H2 may not be the right one. Maybe it's H3, or maybe I can target my CSS now and say all H2 elements are going to be like this. Or I can create other structures, right? Anything else I want to add in here, just like I would normally use, right, inside my app.js, I could do it so that say, well, all names are going to not just be H2 tags. Maybe H2 tags is too big. I'll make them H3 as an example. And you know what? I want to put my my title and my bio maybe in their own paragraph tags, right, for separation. Maybe I can do this if I want to. So I'll do the same thing. I can prepend a paragraph element, right? That's what I'm doing here. And I can do the same thing on the end. I can say kind of /p, right? So this is my paragraph element. I'll do the same thing with my my next line, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste here. Copy and paste all this. Do you guys get what I'm doing? All I'm doing is I'm just adding to the string. I'm making this big long string for this HTML. But I could do that. I can make a separate. I could also make a separate. Here, let's just add a closing tag here as well. I can make it each separate variable for each of the lines. So I can make a variable called name, a variable called title, and a variable called bio. And each one of those variables will have their own way of kind of putting it out there, right? Okay, so I've kind of created that, and let's try it again. I'll just kind of run it again. I'll refresh and see what I get. And if you notice, I get a bunch of spacing now, right? So this is because there's 2 paragraphs, and paragraphs have their own formatting that's built in, right? And so does the headline. Headline tag has a format. The paragraphs have their own format, and now, you know, I have a way that these things are looking. I'm not happy with the way it looks right now, but what I'm showing you is here, you can add as much for each of these team members as I want. And every team member that I have will be formatted the exact same way when I pull them in from the XML file. So my original XML file, let me go back to it, is going to be, and again, I'm pulling it from content where my team.xml file is. I'm just going to stop debugging. Here's my team XML file. And if you notice, I've got a couple of these records. Here's my record, my first record, and here's my second record, right? Let's make another one to show you what I'm talking about. So I'll make another one, and instead of, I'll leave Ilya as the coordinator in the bottom, I'll make another professor, right? And we'll call him, oh, not professor. We'll call him John, right? And he's a computer science professor, another random professor at Centennial College, right? And let's add inside the bio, we could add in some lorem ipsum text as well, right? Like all kinds of other stuff. And we can't do that here, but I can grab some random text and put it in there if I wanted to, right? But our title is basically showing us this. We can add as many other fields as we want. So instead of name, title, and bio, we can also have contact information, contact number. Let's add that in too. So I want to have, you know what? I only just want to have that. I want to have contact, right? Contact info is what it is, right? And it's going to be a number. So for me, it's going to be this number, right? So I'm reformatting my thing, right? Here's my number, and I'm going to put another one. I don't have a contact number for these guys, right? So I'm just creating my record is going to be, I'm just modifying it, right? I'm just going to make it so that this guy is going to have a lovely 555-5550, right? And you know what? I don't know his number offhand, but let's just do it so that we're just going to do the same thing. 555-5551. Just that way we know that they're different, right? So there's our numbers. We'll even give them an extension, right? Extension 3000, right? Doesn't matter. We can add more information for these team members because I'm creating, my team member is actually a record, and each of these things here is a field. That's all they are, right? Okay, cool. But let's see if I even read these things. Well, I've read name, title, and bio, right? And for me to add contact information, I got to add that in there too, because that's a different node value. So I'm just going to take this last piece, right, like this. I'm going to fix this in a second. I'm going to copy it and plop it in here, right? Here's, instead of bio, I'm going to kind of hit contact. And let's take some of these things away. I can turn this into a plus because I want to concatenate all that stuff. I want to take one of these, in fact, all of these line breaks, because I'm using paragraph tags now, right? In fact, what I'll do is I'll say that, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll do that. And the same thing goes with my headline. I don't need my line breaks. I'll need a couple line breaks after my last paragraph, though, or maybe one line break, because I'm also going to have a headline for that one. And that means I got to fix it up on the front end, right? So I can't just put a line break on the front and not have a line break. You know, I can't just do this stuff on the end. Okay, so that's cool. So there's paragraph tags, punch paragraph tags, and I've got one line break instead of all these other ones. I'm also including the contact, right? That's one thing I've changed. And if everything goes well, then when I kind of press play, then I'm going to get my team members, right, with all the different information. So now I've got professor, here's my computer science stuff, my phone number, and everything else. Make sense? Do you understand what I've done? Okay, very simple. All I've done is read a file, the XML file, and pulled in the information so that I can manipulate it. And I'm doing this without using a server necessarily. I don't have any PHP technology here. It's all JavaScript with Ajax and a little bit of jQuery that I'm using to pull it in. Okay, so I've got my file. We're going to manipulate this file a little bit further. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. In fact, just before we continue, I want to update my solution. So I'm going to go to Home, my Solution Explorer. Sorry, let me just stop debugging for a second. I'm at my Team Explorer. Go Home, Changes, and I'm just going to add in here that I modified team.xml and app.js. Commit. And now you guys, if you follow me up on GitHub, you're good to go. Okay, that's done. Let's go back to this. So we've done this piece, right? Again, we can use jQuery shorthand for some of this stuff. And the jQuery shorthand, because remember, we're using jQuery and so far JavaScript to access our XML files, but I can use this other stuff, these methods, load, the .get method, right, where I use an URL, the data, and a success, yes or no, as opposed to using the way we did it before. Also, I can use the getJSON method to get JSON data instead. These are all shorthand methods we can use with jQuery, because jQuery is a shorthand language, right, that we use, almost like an extension of JavaScript, right? So let's take a look. Here's an example. I want to say this. Here's my load method. I want to target my solution ID, right? And I want to load in my solutions HTML piece inside of here, right? This is what some of you were asking me before. Hey Tom, I have my solutions HTML piece in another file with all of its HTML. How can I load that stuff into where I have my solutions ID, my div tag? Okay, let's try that out, right? So what does this do? So here I have my index, and you know what? I have my team members in here, and I've got my ID of team where everything is appearing. This is where all my team members are going to be. But you know what? I want some other content, right? So here I'm going to put inside I'm going to create another content tag, right? Actually, I'll do the shorthand, div with an ID of content, right? If I can type properly. Okay, here's my content. Now there's nothing in here, right? But this is where my content's going to be. And let's say I'm going to have another file in my Solutions Explorer. I'm going to create in my project, I'm going to go do another file. So add, and instead of an HTML file, and we'll call this solutions or content.html, right? So my content is going to be another file. All right, well, this is another file. I got to adhere to all the regular things that this HTML stuff has, right? Do I? Well, let's see if we don't, right? So let's make this file the way it is. Instead of all this stuff, let's just add in pieces that we want. So we don't want all of this stuff in here as well, the title and blah, 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 because we're getting just data. All we're doing is loading pieces of the HTML data inside of here. So I'm going to kind of do this. I'm going to say, well, my HTML document isn't going to have a head in this particular case, but I'm going to have a div tag, right? And my div tag is going to include a paragraph tag. So I know that. So here's a paragraph tag. And in my paragraph tag, actually my H1, it'll have an H2 tag, right? My H2 tag will have in there a headline of content, because that's what I want, right? And underneath that, there's going to be a paragraph tag. And inside of there, right, here's my, this is actually wrong. Let's go back. I meant to do this. Sorry. Here's my content, and in my paragraph tag, I want some lorem text. So I'll say like lorem 20, some lorem text, okay? So this is what's in my content.html, right? This stuff here. It's not really HTML, it's just a block of content right now with an H2 header, right? I've saved it, but I want it to appear here inside of my content div tag, right? So if I go back to my content HTML, right? I've got another div tag in here, right? That I've another divider. I could put that in there or whatever. I'm going to give it another ID of my content, just to make it, you know, show that it's different, right? So I can put as much data or little data as I want. Okay, now I'm going to go into my app.js. So here in my function actually right now, my init function, all it does is it loads in content from my XML file. But at the bottom here, I want to add some other access. Here, I'm just going to kind of put this up here. So after I get my data from my XML, I want to kind of replace my stuff from that's inside my content with how this works. I want to load in my solutions.html file. Let's try that out. Or in this case, it'll be content.html. So again, I'm using jQuery. I'm going to target my content ID, and I want to use my load to load in my content.html. Now, if I do that, is my content.html, is that the right path? Because this is the biggest problem people have with doing this. Well, we'll know when we get it. Let's see how it works if I run it, right? Okay, and I'm just going to kind of refresh this thing, right? Oh, look, right? So did it error out? Let's just look at more tools in JavaScript console. And it looks like, hey, I got some output from my JavaScript, which I wanted. And by the way, that's over here in, sorry, that's over here in app.js. I did some output. I said, hey, I did a console.log, which I can get rid of now. I want my app started. I did this, and now I want kind of a section down here to say, you know, when I'm doing this, I want to load my file. So I'll say console.log, just for our output for us, just to test, is loading XML content. Right? So that's what I've done here at this stage inside my what this is a an event handler, right? You know, that's what it is. It's an event listener and handler all one that loads XML data, right? And this down here actually does the loading. So load XML data. That's what it does here with Ajax, you know, via Ajax call, right? And this down here, I'm going to load HTML content, right, via jQuery. That's what I'm doing here, right? So it's a different operation I'm doing here, right? So after I've loaded it, let's make or while I'm loading it, make a console.log, right? That I'm doing that, loading HTML content. Just so we're on the same page here. Right, so we understand. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. So I've got this piece, right? I've got this piece down here, and I'm loading some HTML data. And now when I run this thing, let's run it again, right? And I ran, of course, the wrong thing. I meant to go to index.html and run that. I love it. And I'm going to refresh, and it's down there. I'm just going to pull all this away. And if you notice, this is all the content. These three pieces are from the XML file, and this piece down here, right, is from the HTML file. So I'm reading the file in 3 different ways, or 2 different ways, right? One using JavaScript, the other one is jQuery. And if I look at the output on my JavaScript console, I see that my app starts loading, and look what it says here, loading XML content, loading HTML content, and then I load my XML content again. Why does it do it 3 more times? Why is that event handler firing again and again and again, right? Because what's happening is the event fires every time it prints every time I read from the console, or read from the file, it reads it 3 times. That's what it's doing actually. Just different pieces of it. So I'm reading the file through my loop while I'm iterating 3 times, right? But I wanted you to see how this works. Okay, so this is the file, and I'm using jQuery for this piece. Well, that's very useful, isn't it? Because that means I could hold piece parts of my file, right, in a different place, and load that in with jQuery, just the content that I'm looking at, as opposed to loading everything in, like to actually physically typing stuff. I can have my own little HTML files in a separate place, right? And I use jQuery to load the content of that file, the HTML piece from that file, without a header or anything, into the place that I want my content. I can use jQuery to do that, which is really, really efficient and really neat. Okay, with this one line, actually. Let's take a look at that line that I used, right? One line loads in and replaces the content inside of this ID with content in it. It's very powerful. Okay, cool. So I can do that. And this is the get method. Here's my jQuery get method, where this is by chance, it's just PHP. We're not going to use PHP. But that it can include data calls, right, and a function. This is the function, the callback function that I want to use. So I can do this with PHP, and I can also do this with JSON, right? Here's my JSON, right? If I want to read a JSON file, and I can actually this is my callback from my getJSON method. Now we're not going to cover this right now, but at the end of the day, getJSON and getXML is very similar. So here's what it could look like if I want to, here's on my document ready, which would be on my when my file is ready, I want to have an event handler, a click function, and when I click on it, it's going to load in from my solutions file. It's going to load in a part of my HTML. I'm going to go in there because remember I can actually access an anchor tag. I can have more than one piece of content inside my my solution. So when I click on this vProspect or vConvert or vRetain, these three different buttons, it'll load in different pieces of data while I'm clicking, right? So I'm having three little event handlers here. My click event, which we covered last week, right? And I can load in, I can use this .load method to load in different pieces of HTML inside of there. This is really useful, right? You need to know this for the next section that we're going to cover today, jQuery Mobile, because there's going to be an opportunity for us to read your original file. Why would I get you, think about this now, why would I get you to redo everything, right, from scratch? It makes no sense for me to copy and paste from your portfolio site where I can just load the data in from your portfolio site in here by using these anchor tags, by creating these IDs, right, for each different section. So you have a section, for example, in your pages that you're loading. Let's say you have a page that you're loading on your portfolio site, and the portfolio site has a page that shows your bio, right? Why would I take the data from your bio and rewrite all that stuff or copy and paste when it's already there, right? I just have to read that data, and I can target a specific section of it as opposed to loading the entire file in. That makes no sense, right? And I can do that by using this specific methodology. So we want to do that so that way if I change my original portfolio site, my jQuery mobile site stays updated. Okay? Are you guys getting it? Right? So that way, because we're going to talk jQuery mobile in a second, I don't want you guys to be lost. Right? So here's an example of I'm using this this user interface, and in this particular case, I have an ID of vProspect, vConvert, and vRetain. They're just IDs. And inside there, I have this href, this anchor tag, that's a clickable link. Basically, that's what these things are. And when I click it, inside the div tag is where all this stuff happens. So if I click this stuff, then this is the all the data that's coming from the solutions.html file here, and it's going to populate all this data inside of this div, right? Which is good. That's excellent. That means I don't have to, kind of duplicate what I've already got. Why would I do that? It makes no sense. Okay, so I did my XML data. I used XML data the other way, right? But now I can use jQuery for my XML data to create the same kind of thing that I did before, right? So it's the same thing, var XML, right? I can create a jQuery, right, to position everything that I already did the same way that I did it. But instead of using my format that looks like this, this is the JavaScript methodology, right, where I do XHR on ready state change, blah, 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 blah. I don't have to do that anymore. I can just do it like this with jQuery. This does the same thing, right, where I use the .get method, right, to read in the text file, whatever that is, in my function, as well as I can create my anonymous function in here, passing in the data variable, the data stuff that comes in. That's actually, it comes in from my, my files, and I can access the data and assign it to each of the these XML. And I'm using the find method of the XML doc. So when I declare XML doc, I'm actually declaring it as the actual get itself. Because if you notice, I'm using the this variable. Now this looks very complex, right? But actually it's very easy. Instead of me making an XHR request the old way with JavaScript, this is a shorthand way of doing the same thing. Okay? Both ways are valid. I've posted it here for you for your viewing pleasure. You may or may not decide to use this when it comes to accessing XML data as we go forward. But we need to understand XML and how Ajax loads up different pieces of our content, because that's how jQuery Mobile works. jQuery Mobile works as in it uses jQuery to reload other sections of the page when we call them, right? So it doesn't load all, it doesn't display all portions of our single page document, only pieces that we need at one time. And we use Ajax to do that. Here's the example for JSON. So if you're going to use JSON data instead of XML data, it's up here for your viewing pleasure. Use this as a reference card. Okay, I'm not going to go on beyond this. This is enough. So that's Ajax in a nutshell. Ajax, our methodology, asynchronous JavaScript, and we're using XML. We're loading XML data, allows us to load data into our HTML document without reloading the page and without using a backend of some kind, like for example PHP. Right? We don't need a PHP server to host our data. We can just use Ajax. One thing it doesn't allow us to do, if you notice here, is write. It won't allow us to write. I can't use Ajax to write. I can read from a file. But writing to a file, the problem with writing to a file, this is where we need Node or some kind of PHP on the back end or something like that. It gives us this security error because we don't want our clients to write to our server, right? That's dangerous. You can mess up stuff, right? So that's why it doesn't allow you. Most browsers will disable writing to a file, which is a problem if we're writing a game, right? If we're making a game that wants to use some kind of high score text file or something, some flat file you want to write to, you can't. You can't write to an XML file. You can write temporarily using web storage, right? We can kind of use kind of this HTML5 web storage kind of idea, but we can't use, we're not going to be able to use a flat, we can't write to a flat file the same way. Not unless you use Node. Okay, or PHP. So this is this piece. I'm just going to save this piece.